So there are particularly two ways to create threads. One is using the runnable method and one is using extending the thread class. So in this, if you see, I'm opening the thread class and the runnable interface. Now you see in thread class, this is one of the way where you create it using the thread. Now I'm going to create a thread by extending the thread class. So that is one of the first way to create an thread. And when you're dealing with multi-threading, then you are actually trying to create a separate thread and trying to run it. So there is a run method which you have to override it over here. Make sure you write that override on the top of that, and then you write your implementation, the logic inside this. So once you override this particular run method, you can write this particular logic over here. So when you try to call this particular method from a main method, and you try to create a thread and start it, your run method will be called up. So this is how you can actually create an instance. So I'm trying to create an instance of that particular thread class, and then I'm going to call the thread.start, so which will start that particular application or the method to be run up. So when the thread is started as a separate thread, so that particular run method logic will be running over here. Now if you see, a separate thread has been run from the main thread, so instead of running from the main thread. Now let's try to create multiple instances of that particular thread. Now here if you see, I'm trying to create two instances and there will be two threads separately running from the main thread. Now if you're dealing with multi-threading, this is quite handful. So that is the reason we are trying to create multiple threads. Now I'm just trying to add some logic inside the run method. So I'm just trying to print some number inside from randomly 0 to 5. Along with that, I'm trying to just print it over here. So let's see what how when we run this particular program, what would be the output. It will be printing those number of times if you run this particular program. Now you see it is printing 5 times. So 0 to 5 times it is printing 2 times because there are two threads created over here. Now let's try to create a thread in the while loop, so for loop. So I'm trying to create, instead of writing one thread at a time, creating multiple instances, I'm just making a use of the loop over here to create that particular thread and also start that particular thread. Now you see the thread is started, and then if the number of times, the 5 times the thread has been looping, and then that many times the thread is created. Now I wanted to pass some data to the thread. So I'm trying to get some information. Let's say the thread number over here. So in constructor, I'm trying to add a thread number over here, and I will assign to that particular number. And when you're trying to create an instance from the main class, you will be able to call this particular method. So when I'm trying to call this, it will be in the for loop. I will try to add this over here, the numbers, the thread number, which thread number it is running, and also what is the number of loop it is trying to run over here. Now let's see that you see the number of threads starting, and then also the loop is for every thread it is running for 5 times over here. So that's how it will run. Now let's try to see how we can handle the exception. Now let's say a specific instance, a thread number, and also the specific iteration, I wanted to throw some exception over here. So what I will do, I will try to run this and see. I'll just instead of creating that particular uh, exception, I will trying to throw this particular exception over here. So you see, I'm trying to throw this over here. So whenever your thread is running over here, so let's say on that particular instance of thread number, it will run and there will be an exception thrown. So what will happen over here, I have to add a thread.sleep over here in order to function and completely work over here. So I'm just trying to add that particular thread.sleep logic over here in that particular method. Now you see, I'm adding that thread.sleep, and then I will be surrounding it with the interrupt exception to cover the exception over here. Now I will just see, I will just run this. Now you see, other threads are still running in spite of the thread 2 is actually broken up or it is failed up. So the exception is thrown, still the other threads are running. It is not hampering the other part of the code. Now let's try to create a thread using the runnable interface. Now we looked at the thread way to create it. Now we are trying to look at the runnable way. Now this is one of the better way and the most approved way to say, create a thread, because In this way you're trying to get a chance to extend another thread. So this is one of the approach which normally people select, because you get a chance to extend another class. Now I'm trying to create a thread class over here. Now this is one additional step which we have to do when you're dealing with Runnable, because in threads you directly have to call that particular thread and then create the thread. Now you have to pass that particular Runnable to the thread and then call it. So that is one additional step you have to do that. Now see, it has already started and running it over here. So here actually I'm trying to go into create another array over here, where I'm trying to create number of 5 threads over here. And then I'm going to create, instead of that particular passing that particular static thing, actually I'm going to take it as a dynamic array over here. And then I'm going to instantiate and create in that particular array over here. So and then I will try to run this. So similarly it is running over here. The sequence might be little bit here and there because of the multi-threading. Now let's try to see what exactly the join does. Now when you're trying to create a join, it will wait for the other threads to complete. So after that only the main thread will complete that particular thread. So once all the threads which are created and started and running, after everything is completed, then only it will stop or exit the main thread. After that, if you see at the end of this, you will see that the thread has stopped at the end of this particular thing and all the threads has been run up. So you will see at the end, you will see there is already a thread executed. So after this, that is the useful of that join method. Now when you're trying to check if the thread is alive or not, I've written a code inside that particular for thread to check whether thread is alive or not. Now see, firstly it started the thread and then it is going to run the thread. Now we'll look at the difference between the thread dot start and thread dot run. This is quite an important, because when you try to create a thread dot start, it is going to create a separate thread from the main thread. And if you see, I'm trying to create an I'm trying to check that, if it is a thread number 2, then I'm trying to start it, or else I'm going to run it. So when you try to call the thread start, then the it will be a separate thread, but when you try to call the run method, it will only execute that thread in the same main thread itself. So that is the difference. So it will not be created as a separate thread, and it will not be considered as a multi-threading logic over here.